What if Rika were to eat one of Megumi's fingers? What would happen? We're going to talk about that and a few other things, but spoilers beware. Okay, so first of all, shout out to Rose for asking me this. And now that we're past the spoiler warning, the interesting part of this question is we're talking about Meguna here. So Rika, by consuming portions of people, can copy their curse techniques, right? So if she were to eat one of Meguna's fingers, what would happen? Would she get the 10 shadows? Would she get shrine? Or would she get both? Well, as fate would have it, we actually do have something we can reference here because Yuji also has two curse techniques, Enshrine and Blood Manipulation, and we know that Rika ate one of his fingers, and because of that, Yuta copied Shrine. But did Yuta also copy Blood Manipulation? We really don't know. I would say that it seems like he didn't, but we just don't know, right? Because there was a narrative reason to showcase Shrine. It was part of tricking Sukuna into thinking that's what they had done with the last finger. So, that was why we had that moment, and there really was no purpose to a moment of showing Yuta use blood manipulation, especially because Yuji and Choso were also there. So maybe he had it, and, it just was no reason to show it, or maybe you can only get one curse technique from eating one part of a body, right? Like maybe he would have needed to eat another finger to get blood manipulation, and it was just luck of the draw that they got Shrine on the first one. It's really hard to say, but I do think that that likely means he would be able to copy both the 10 Shadows and Shrine from a Megami finger or multiple fingers, assuming he had Rika consume enough to meet the conditions for copying both. Next up, I got another Yuta Rika question from Fifunmi here, who says, what if Rika was able to copy the curse techniques of cursed tools by consuming them? And that's a really cool idea, and I think that would be awesome, right? Like if we had Rika consume a part of the Soul Split Katana or the Inverted Spear of Heaven, then Yuta would also be able to mimic those effects. And if this was the case, Fifumi wanted to know how I think that changes Yuta's ranking. And I honestly don't think it does, just because he's already so strong, but that effect isn't enough to get him over the people I currently have over him. So I don't think that alone would put him on the level of a Gojo or a Sukuna. Now, I do currently have Kenjaku ranked third in the verse, and this in particular, I don't think helps him too much against Kenjaku, other than maybe the Soul Split Katana. Assuming Yuta is able to get some sword slashes on Kenjaku, then obviously the Soul Split makes those far more devastating. But I don't think it's enough, because I think that Kenjaku basically wins a domain clash, and that's his win condition against Yuta. But again, this is assuming end of series Yuta as we saw him, in a one-on-one. I do think Yuta pretty quickly in the future will surpass Kenjaku, and obviously if he had the Inverted Spear and Soul Split as part of his toolkit, that would help him do it even faster. But yeah, this is a really cool idea, and part of me wonders, could it even work? Because, what is the actual process of Rika copying something, right? Why does it necessarily need to be, flesh and blood and DNA? Considering the cursed tools, contain those techniques within them, at least in some form, fashion, or understanding. If she ate them, maybe she could. I mean, I don't think this is true since we never saw it in the series, but why not? Next up, I've got another question that deals with Yuta's copy here from Kraft, where he says, what logical reason do you think there was for Yuta to not copy Nobara's technique and to have been using resonance on Sukuna far earlier in the fight? Because, I mean, if there had been a resonance on Sukuna when he was fighting Gojo, that would probably be enough to have given Gojo the win, right? Hit him with the resonance, Gojo gets his domain off faster, GG, right? So why wouldn't they have done that? And I think there's two reasons. The first is that Nobara was in a coma, right? Fighting for her life for months. So he probably didn't deem it appropriate or even safe to have Rika consume more of her and put her in even more of a life-threatening situation. Now, you could say, well, Rika could have just eaten a pinky finger, just like he did with Yuji, to get one use of the technique and then, time it perfectly, right? Well, I don't think the reason they did that is because even when Yuta copies a technique, that doesn't mean he gets the full understanding of it. He even mentions that without Inumaki helping him develop his curse speech, he wouldn't have been able to use it the way he did against Sukuna. And we know that in particularly, Nobara had to use certain binding vows in order to strike that immortal finger without actually damaging it, but just still having the soul resonance effect on it. So I doubt Yuta would be able to pull off that type of nuance with the technique. having only consumed a small portion of her and not having her there to help like coach him through how to use it. So I think those reasons are sufficient enough to explain why this wouldn't have happened. And then Kraft also asked me, why didn't Red immediately kill Jogo since it's made out of positive cursed energy, which is lethal to cursed spirits? And that's because Red, while it is created with positive cursed energy, I wouldn't say that it is positive cursed energy. And the analogy they use in the series is, imagine like a curse technique is an appliance, and then you feed electricity into that appliance to get an effect, right? So you feed electricity into a vacuum cleaner, you get like suction, right? You feed electricity into a blow dryer, you get heat. So Gojo feeding cursed energy into his technique produces blue. Him feeding positive cursed energy into his technique produces red. So red is like its own thing. And he used positive cursed energy to create it, but it's not necessarily positive cursed energy itself, if that makes sense. Then next up, still on the Yuta train, I got this comment from Silver, which is a follow-up to a video I put out last week talking about Yuta's domain refinement when he was in Gojo's body, how that was still equal to Sukuna's refinement. Basically that Yuta either has that high of refinement, or more likely he was able to access Gojo's refinement, as it were. And Silver said that he doesn't think that Yuta was doing either, that Yuta's is lower, but it wasn't quite Gojo's. And instead what happened is that Yuta's refinement was just equal to this weakened Sukuna's refinement. And I don't think that's the case, only because it's a little too messy for me, that Sukuna's had been weakened so much to such a perfect amount that he now was equal to Yuta. Like, if Yuta had just won the domain clash and that was because Sukuna was so weakened, that would make sense to me, but it's just a little too perfect that he would just so happen to now be equal to Yuta in Gojo's body. So I think it's more likely that the refinement never changed, even though his output had dropped, because like refinement would just be like an entirely different category if we want to think of it that way. So I do think that Yuta was just using Gojo's refinement because he was in his body. That's at least my best guess. Then next up, Marquez asked me who would win, Yuta with Maharaga as well versus Kenjaku with all of the disaster curses absorbed. And to cite back to my ranking I mentioned earlier in this video, I think I gotta go with Kenjaku because I think he was still slightly above end of series Yuta. And I don't think giving Yuta Maharaga moves the needle too much because Kenjaku has so many different options to kill Maharaga before he can adapt, right? He's got Uzumaki himself, but if that doesn't work or he gets adapted to that, then he's got so many different curse spirits, right? Including the disaster curses, like you pointed out. So even if we want to assume they don't understand what Maharaga is and what it can do, there's enough in their arsenal that once they do figure it out, they can deal with Maharaga. And again, like we're saying, it's basically Kenjaku, Mahito, Jogo, Hanami, and Dagon versus Yuta, plus what other hundreds, if not thousands of cursed spirits he has. I think that's just going to be enough, especially because I said, I think Kenjaku domain diffs Yuta, which means he's not going to be able to use his domain. So I think Kenjaku gets the job done there. And then Marquez had a second part to his question, which was, if I have 2 days to prepare and I've got all the sorcerers and all the curses, how would I try and fight a team of Gojo and Sukuna? And I don't mean this to be a cop-out, but I don't think it's possible. Like, you give me the entire rest of the verse, I don't think it's possible. Maybe one or the other. Like maybe we could cook something up to try and deal with one of them, but I don't even know if we could do that, honestly. But both of them, there's no shot. Like the literal best answer there might be to somehow go track down like the 3 legendary vengeful spirits of Japan that are functionally immortal and try to get them to help. Maybe they could do something, or if all else fails, everyone offs themselves in order to set the conditions for the merger, and Kenjaku activates the merger, and maybe that entity of 100 million people merged with Tengen could give them a fight. But beyond those two extreme things, like, I don't think they could get it done. And then finally today, Ayla asked me what I think Kenjaku's reaction was when he first discovered Wasuke, and likened it to maybe Kenjaku needing to solve this Sukuna vessel problem and just walking down the street passing Wasuke and being like, whoa, wait a minute. And as funny as that would be, I bet it was more so like a long, arduous process of tracking the lineage and specifically looking for that that family line, as opposed to just like serendipitously bumping into it. That's gonna do it for this one, y'all. Thank you so much for the support, and thank you all for watching.